Hello students, it's Dr. Yu. Today we're going to learn about motivational speaking. As you go into the workforce, there's going to be times, especially when you're a leader, when you're going to need to be able to motivate your employees and your team. When I've been on projects in the past and I've led projects, I feel like most of the time I'm not giving informative speeches or persuasive speeches. Most of the time I'm giving motivational speeches, encouraging them to continue working hard when they are, but also encouraging them when things get tough, and just encouraging them as individuals to inspire them to want the same things that I want as the leader, which is success for the team as a whole. So in this lecture, you're going to learn how to do motivational speaking. I'm going to teach you different types of motivational speeches and how to structure them so you can complete the assignment for my class, but also apply the principles when you go out into the workforce and need to motivate your team. So here's what we're going to do first. As a preview, we're going to ask 3 questions. What are the types of motivational speeches? How do I structure them? And how do I use powerful language in them? I want to have a little bit of an offshoot on power language because you're going to need to be a source of power when you're trying to motivate an audience. And so I want to make sure you're making good linguistic choices as you do that. So let's start with the first question, which is, what are the types of motivational speeches? There are 4 motivational themes, and they all start with R, and I'm going to go through each of them. The first is rags to riches motivational stories. In a rags to riches story, you're going to talk about how you went from nothing to something. Now, I put nothing in scare quotes because I don't want to infer that if you came from a position of poverty or maybe you're an immigrant who came to the United States, that's nothing. But just the idea that when you're conveying to your audiences, you went from something that was completely not tenable. You were dealt a bad hand, and you took that bad hand and made it into something. So, rags to riches. The classic American rags to riches story is the story of Andrew Carnegie or Elon Musk. All of them came as immigrants to the United States and ended up starting very successful companies and becoming rich. In fact, the whole American dream is the rags to riches idea or upward social mobility. So if you have a story in your life, and some of you perhaps maybe have some kind of situation where you started with little but have ended up here at Mays Business School or have ended up in college, there could be a story there that could be very motivational. So tell us how you got there. There are also recovery stories. Recovery stories are how you persisted through a difficult temporary situation. A recovery story would be something like you were living a normal life and then something happened along the way. Maybe you got into a car accident and you were seriously injured. And somehow, through that injury, you figured out how to improve your situation and you persisted through it. And now here you are walking, standing, and thriving today. So tell us how you made it through that injury. Or you went through a breakup and the breakup really brought you down. And how did you go from being hurt and depressed into becoming a stronger, better human being? A recovery story often involves a reframing of the pain situation into a positive situation. So talk about what was the pain that you went through and how did you reframe it into a positive situation and how are you thriving today as a result? There are also redemption stories. Redemption stories cover how you redeemed yourself after a mistake. A classic redemption story would be perhaps you became addicted to something and you went through a really dark period and you redeemed yourself by going into therapy and getting over that addiction. And here you are now today encouraging everyone to not be addicted to a substance. Or better yet, a redemption story could be how you wronged somebody. You did something that you regret or you made a dumb mistake. And now when you made that mistake, you had a realization and then you made it better again. What's the word I'm trying to think? You So I'll never forget the word. You basically made up with that person. You sought forgiveness from the person, and you redeemed yourself afterwards. So a redemption story is you committed some kind of wrong, and you somehow redeemed yourself in the end. It was a mistake that you made. It wasn't you going through a bad situation like in a recovery story where it maybe wasn't your fault. You got in the car accident, wasn't your fault, or you lost a family member, or somebody broke up with you, or you broke up with somebody. In redemption story, the pain is a result of a choice you made, and here's how you redeemed yourself. Lastly, there are relation themes. And I would call it a theme because it's not necessarily a story, at least not inherently. You could do something where you take an unrelated topic, but you explain how that unrelated topic relates to life and self-development. An example might be what my kids teach me about living in the moment. So what you'll do is you'll talk about your kids. You'll maybe tell a story about how you were playing with your kids one time, and then something happened that was amazing, that you thought your kids would be crying or whatever, and they weren't. They were actually enjoying themselves. And then that taught you that, hey, kids don't overthink things. They just see things for what they are. And what that's taught me is I need to see things about how they are and not get so up in my head. And that's what we need to do, is we need to think like kids more. Okay, so the relation story is you're taking what happened when you watched your kids playing to, this is how we should approach life. This is something that we can learn from that little instance about life. Maybe your dog teaches you something. Or if you have a passion of some kind, maybe you like going to the gym and weightlifting. What does weightlifting teach you about life? Maybe make some relations between principles that are in weightlifting and principles that apply to life. Or what has the military taught you about life and commitment and honor and duty? So those are relation motivational themes. Therefore, you have 4 different options. Think about a rags to riches story. Is your life story something where you went from nothing to something? Or think of a recovery instance. Was there a time when you just temporarily went through some difficult situation? How did you get through that difficult situation? And how are you better today? That's a recovery. A redemption story. Have you made a mistake in your past and ended up finding a way to make up for it and to get forgiveness and redemption for it? Okay, tell us that story. Or do a relation theme. Take something that seems unrelated to life and relate it to life and how it's taught you something, a passion, a hobby, a family member, or a pet. Something like that can teach you something about self-development. Now, how do you structure a motivational speech? And this is where there are options. The first structure I'm going to teach you is one that I've made, and it's inspired by other things, so I don't want to completely claim it as my own, but this is essentially what I do when I do motivational speeches, and I've done them before in contests. It's based on the sandwich, so go back to the speech writing lectures to understand the sandwich, but here's what I would do generally. First, of course, you always have your introduction, so you're going to grab the attention, you're going to tie into a thesis, and you're going to do a light preview. In the previous video lectures on speech writing, I talked about preview. There's actually 2 different types of previews. There's heavy previews and light previews. Heavy previews go in depth what you're going to cover. They usually go something like, today I'm going to cover 3 things. First, I'm going to explain how you screw in the light bulb. Secondly, I'm going to explain how you put the shade onto the lamp. And thirdly, I'm going to explain the 3 different types of wiring and how that implies and how that affects how the light turns on in the lamp or something like that. So very in-depth. A light preview is usually just 1 sentence and it's very vague because it maybe doesn't want to give everything away. So a light preview might just be something like, today I'm going to explain how to turn on a lamp. Okay, so that's like a light preview. Then you're going to do main point 1. Your main point 1 is your pain situation. You're going to spend time talking about the difficult situation that you were in. So this applies to the first 3 types of motivational speeches. A relation speech is going to have a different structure, but you can use this motivational speech structure still, but just modify it for a relation situation. So in main point 1, you're going to talk about the pain situation. Explain the pain that you were in. Give us details. You want to use very vivid language to do that, and I'll talk about how to do that later in the presentation. But make the audience feel your pain. You want to bring the audience down at the beginning of a motivational speech. What you just don't want to do is keep them down throughout the speech and then never come back up. But you definitely want to bring them down so there's that contrast. So make them feel your pain. Then in main point 2, this is where you hit your realization and recovery. Here you want to describe your aha moment that initiated your recovery. So let's say you're going through some pain situation. Perhaps you've reached some level of depression. Okay, when you're in that mode of depression, at what point did you say enough is enough? Where was that moment where you hit rock bottom and you said, okay, something has to change? What was that aha moment? How did it happen? And what was that principle that came into play, that came into your mind, that you held on to start initiating change? So explain how you applied your aha moment to your recovery process from the pain situation. And tell us how you did it step by step. Here's what you don't want to do. I was in this depressed mode, I was really hurt, but then I realized that I just need to be better. So I got better, and now I'm here today. Like, see, it's too abstract. Like, well, wait, like, how did you realize that you just need to get better? And then how did you just suddenly go from being depressed to doing all this stuff? Give us a little bit more detail. How did you apply the principle? What did you do first? And then what did you do second? And what did you do third? And how did it all grow to you being recovered and awesome and who you are today? So explain that. And then thirdly, you want to have your third main point be your application to the audience. When I watch motivational speeches, often people will do a good job with main point 1 and main point 2, but then they don't really spend any time on main point 3, which is application to the audience. In fact, you should be pretty even, I would say. So if I was like going to use the pen here, like you should be pretty even with realization and recovery, and main situation and application to the audience. So spend a lot of time explaining how your pain situation could be similar to the audience's, how your aha principle can apply to their situation. So figure out what brings my audience together in this room today. If it's the MBA program, okay, that could be a pain situation, taking quantitative math and all that stuff that you're taking. Okay, so how does your principle from main point 2 apply to the MBA program that we're all going through at this time? But maybe it's a different situation. Maybe your audience is just a general audience. Okay, suggest some pain situations that this might relate to. If you were depressed because you maybe went through a breakup, and main point 3, you can say, maybe you've been through a breakup. Or maybe you've just been hurt by somebody else. Somebody let you down, whether it was a brother, a sister, a mother, a parent, or a teacher. We've all been there where we've all been let down. Okay, so I'm tying my pain situation to the audience's situation. And then I explain my aha moment. But my aha moment and then whatever your aha moment can apply here too. Believe in this, believe things can be better, believe in that, and then like apply it to the pain situation of theirs. And give steps. Tell them how they can embrace this principle. And then end with your conclusion. Review, thesis, tie-in, clincher. And you have a complete speech, a complete motivational speech. So here's an example of a student. Now, I don't remember it verbatim because it was years ago when I saw it, but it was just one of the best ones I've heard for sure. And it was called Only Through Pain. So this is a little bit of an embellishment of what he did. So he starts off talking about a hockey game comeback that he was in. It was a very short story, so he wasn't top heavy. But it was basically a hockey game was going poorly, but him and his friend, came back and said, only through pain, we're going to get through it. And then they ended up winning the game. So then he makes the thesis that pain is not always our enemy. And he previews he's going to tell about how pain became his friend. His main point 1 was about the loss of his friend. So John was his friend, and he went into some detail about how great friends they were. But then he told the story within that main point of how when he was called into the hospital because his friend was in a car accident, and he was actually there when his friend passed away. So he watched his friend pass away. And then after watching his friend pass away, he underwent a serious depression, and he actually quit hockey and he quit doing all these things, and he hit that low point because he lost his friend, his best friend. But then in main point 2, he had his realization. As he laid in bed, he realized his saying that he and his friend had only through pain. And he realized that this was a pain situation, and only through pain can good things happen. So he began to embrace his depression, not as an end, but as a challenge to grow. And so he started talking about how, to honor my friend, I need to believe that even through the pain of his loss, I still need to grow because that's what he would have wanted me to do. And so he picked up the hockey stick again and started doing things that he was doing before with a new vigor because he was thinking of his friend. And then he applied it to everyone else. In this case, it was the advanced public speaking class. So he said, look, public speaking's not easy, especially advanced public speaking. You may also be going through other pains. And so he talked about some of those. And then he just said, only through pain can you reach your potential. See it as a challenge. Look for it. Embrace it. And just lifted the audience up that way. And then he concludes, this was a story about my friend and my journey through pain. And then he ties into hockey. Life is like hockey, and often you'll be behind in the game. But clincher, but only through pain can you take that winning shot towards your goal. And then he dropped a few other hockey metaphors. But that made it go full circle with the hockey attention grabber. So this would be a good outline of a motivational speech with an example. Now, don't feel like this is a cookie cutter situation where everybody has to do this exact outline. This is more or less for people who just have no idea how to do this speech. This gives you some guidance on how it might look. But feel free to play with this outline or to do the other structure that I'm about to show you. The other structure you can use, and this one has a more formal name, it's Monroe's Motivated Sequence. In Monroe's Motivated Sequence, here's how it looks. First, you have your attention grabber, and you'll have a credibility statement, which will basically say, here's how I relate to you all, and you'll preview your thesis. In your main point one, you're going to talk about the need that your team is facing. So describe the problem that your team is facing or that your audience is facing. We currently have this other team going against us, and they're big and they're strong, blah, blah, blah. But we got to win this. We got to describe the stakes. We got to win this game because this is the championship on the line. Main point two is satisfaction. So describe the solution or action steps that your team needs to take and explain those steps. So what we need to do is we need to go out there and we need to play good defense. The defense wins championships and blah, blah, and block every ball, stop every run, block every pass, tackle every move, that kind of thing. Explain the action steps and then speak to their self-efficacy. All of you have trained for this day, that kind of thing. All of you have been together for years, and this is what we've been thinking about, okay? So satisfaction, you're explaining, here's the need, here's how we're satisfying it. But here's the beautiful part of Monroe's Motivated Sequence. This is my favorite part. Visualization. Define success and its benefits. So then make your audience think about what would happen if we succeeded. What would that future look like? Make them feel, touch, taste, and see that imagined future. If we do our jobs, we will be holding the World Championship trophy. Imagine what that feeling will be like. Just think how we will represent our town, how we will live up to all of what the world has thought of us, and all that stuff. So visualization is all about what happens if we succeed? How good would success taste? And making your audience feel it and say, yeah, I want that. And then call to action. End on the call to action. Give them that first step to take towards their visualized future. If you want that trophy in your hands tonight, go out there and play good defense, that kind of thing, and leave them on a high. So that's the call to action. This is Monroe's Motivated Sequence. Introduction, need, satisfaction, visualization, call to action. So make sure you visualize. Do not just do need and satisfaction and just say, yeah, so success would be good. And then go to call to action. No. What makes Monroe's Motivated Sequence beautiful is main point three. It's the most important part of main point three, I think. Here's an example of Monroe's Motivated Sequence in a famous movie, The Wolf of Wall Street. Unfortunately, the part I'm talking about is the pick up the phone and start dialing. The unfortunate part isn't that it's that. The unfortunate part is there's some inappropriate language and references, so I can't show it, unfortunately. But what I did here is I took that speech and just recasted it in Monroe's Motivated Sequence structure so you can see how well Martin Scorsese, the writer of that script, or was it Aaron Sorkin, one of the two, how the script writers did a good job with that speech. So the introduction was, see those little black boxes? Those are the telephones. And then Jordan Belfort established his credibility. I've been a rich man and a poor man, and I became rich through the telephone. Now, he didn't say that second part directly, but that's what he implied, because that's how he started out. He was poor, but then he became rich and rich through his phone calls. Now, he didn't really preview his speech, but the implied preview was the telephone is key to your wealth. Then the need. Steve Madden's stock is opening. We need to sell this stock to get rich. Because remember, in that part of the movie, Steve Madden was on IPO, and they were trying to sell that so they could make a lot of money off of it. So the need was sell Steve Madden's stock. Satisfaction. Use the words that I taught you, right? Because Jordan Belfort taught them how to sell. And then he said in his speech, persist through every sale. Don't take no for an answer. And then he even has a little quote, become a telephone terrorist, right? So stuff Steve Madden stock down their throats, all those things, that's all satisfaction. Use the words that I taught you and all that. Then main point 3, visualization. A lot of visualization in this, and this is what makes this speech really good. And that's why I love Wolf of Wall Street. There was one part where he says, imagine driving a fancy car with an attractive spouse, while actually you're the one driving the beat-up Pinto, and your friend has the attractive spouse and nice car. Or vice versa. So you could do it. Imagine you're driving in a fancy car with an attractive spouse while your friend is driving a beat-up Pinto. And so it's kind of like you can be better than everyone else. In Wolf of Wall Street, it was the other way around. Imagine if you're driving this beat-up Pinto and your friend pulls up with a nice car and attractive spouse. Look at what you're missing out on. So he kind of did like a negative visualization where it was more about if we don't succeed, look how terrible things would be. So that's another way to do visualization. But generally, for more motivational purposes, I like the positive view. He also talked about if you make these sales, you'll be more rich than the richest CEO in America. And then he even had a part, are you sick of your credit card bills? Is your landlord getting ready to evict you? Is your girlfriend, boyfriend think you're a worthless loser? All those things. All those things go away when you're rich, right? Because he even says, I deal with my problems by getting rich. So that's all visualization. He's getting them to see the value of succeeding. And then finally, he has a call to action. Pick up the phone and start dialing. Okay? And then he just says, knock it out of the park. And that would be Monroe's motivated sequence from that Wolf of Wall Street scene. Next, how can I use powerful language? Well, there's 3 aspects of forceful language. First, you have intensity. Intensity is the degree to which a speaker's attitude deviates from neutrality. Intense language is extreme and forceful as opposed to being very, very light. So here's an example. Instead of saying, John is not smart, you would say, John is shockingly stupid. You can see how just all of the adjectives and adverbs deviate from neutrality or formality. So intense language is going to take a very firm stance, and it's going to be almost exaggerated. It's going to be something where it's not neutral. It's not formal. This is insane. Okay, that's intense language. Then you have vividness. Vividness is the use of concrete imagery versus abstract detail or just abstractions. Compare the 2 phrases. The glass came crashing down in a spiral and scattered pieces everywhere with a loud shattering noise. Versus, the glass broke. One is very concrete. The other is very abstract. When you're talking about your pain, you want to use concrete imagery. What you don't want to do is just speak in abstractions when you're talking about the pain. You want the audience to feel the pain. But then once they feel the pain, you want to then bring them back up by telling them how you got through the pain. And then you want to set them free with your main point 3 with how they can get out of their pain. So in a motivational speech, it's almost like, here, I'm going to move this to the side here. It's almost like this thing right here, if we can take it. It's like you're going to bring the audience down by talking about your pain. And then you're going to bring them back up by talking about how you came to your aha moment. And then you're going to set them free with main point 3 by explaining how they can improve their own lives. So you're bringing them down to bring them back up. That's what you're doing in a motivational speech. To bring them down, you got to be concrete about the pain. But then you also got to be concrete about the recovery. But then you can be abstract about how it applies to their lives, because your audience might not be in the same exact pain situation that you are, but they might have something else that is related. So that's where abstract description can be really good, is in main point 3. But you don't want to live in abstract land in main point 1 and main point 2. So concrete versus abstract imagery. Be very concrete when you want to be forceful. Talk about things in detail. Then, offensiveness. Now, I'm not encouraging profanity, but profanity can be effective, forceful language at times. But we're not going to allow profanity in our motivational speeches. But in the future, there is a difference, perhaps, between saying, please get out of bed, or get your you-know-what out of your bed. I don't want to say the word on YouTube and all that. But if you use a bad word, instead of say, get your blank out of bed, that's probably going to get somebody's attention more than, can you please get out of bed? Especially, and I remember having a teacher, like, people weren't being quiet, and this was like in 5th grade, and the teacher was like, okay, please be quiet, and then people still weren't being quiet, so the teacher just said, shut the heck up, and heck was with H-E-double-L hockey stick, and just by hearing our teacher cuss for the first time ever, everybody got quiet. Like, it was just, you could hear a pin drop, because you'd never heard a teacher cuss before. But that's forceful language. So there is something to that. But then there's a lot of trade-offs to offensive language, because you also have to worry about making sure you don't offend anyone or hurt anyone's feelings or be politically incorrect. So use very, very, very sparingly. But there is powerless language and weak language. And we want to make sure, especially if we're looking to become management professionals, that we're not speaking this way. We don't want to use a lot of hesitation. So these are phrases that signal uncertainty and anxiety. All those things are hesitations. That's why PitchVantage and I are working on helping get rid of any disfluencies. But secondly, we also have hedges. Hedges are qualifications to an utterance. Something like, I guess, or I think, or maybe, I think, I'm not too sure. Okay, all of those hedges, like I guess, I think, I sort of, I maybe, all those things, powerless. Or weak intensifiers. These are things that fortify the utterance, but so much that it doesn't seem real. I really believe it and agree with you a lot, okay? A lot of people say, I really, really want this. I really, really, really do. That's a weak intensifier. Just use a strong one word. I mean, if you truly believe something, then use another word besides really believe it. Say, I am adamant about this, okay? Use something else use a strong word than several weak words to express a higher desire. But also, over-polite language. If you're too polite, sometimes that can be taken as weakness. Excuse me, if you don't mind too much, can you maybe shut the door? Too much deference, too much subordination, it may seem like too weak of a request, like as if the person really doesn't need to take it seriously. Now, in communication, there's a theory called politeness theory that talks about power, distance, and rank, and threats to negative face versus positive face, but I'll spare you all that theory for now. But yes, we don't want to be over polite. There is such thing as being polite and getting what you want, but you just don't want to overdo some aspects of politeness. Feel free to ask about politeness theory and Q&A in class. Then we have the tag question. A tag question is a question that you tag at the end of a sentence that should be declarative. Something like, this is fun, right? Or we should do this, right? We're doing this, okay? Is that okay? Is also a tag question. So get rid of tag questions. This is fun. And if they disagree, they can say they disagree. If they don't agree, or if they agree, they can say, yeah, it is fun. When you're trying to speak powerfully, get rid of the tag questions. Now, if you're trying to invoke a discussion, so you're trying to get people involved, you're trying to do some audience engagement, then okay, use a tag question. But when you're trying to make declarative statements, drop the tag question. And then lastly, we have disclaimers. Disclaimers are statements offered that anticipate doubts or signal a problem. Something like, this might sound really dumb, but, or I'm not sure if this is right, but. Now, sometimes you really just aren't sure about things, but overuse of disclaimers can make you seem weaker. So you don't want to be using these a lot. You just want to use these for very sparing situations. Now, oops, let's go to the next slide. That's me. Okay, there we go. Here's our review. What are the types of motivational speeches? So we learned about the 4 R's, the 4 different themes that you can use for your motivational speeches. Those are all ideas that you can take and help you brainstorm something that you could use for your motivational speech. How do you structure them? I gave you 2 different structures ready to go that you could use to structure your motivational speech. And even with my structure, there can be ways that you can play with it a little bit. Just make sure you know what you're doing. Because at the end of the day, you want the audience to feel motivated. You do the motivational speech wrong when you make the audience feel sad in the speech and you never get them out of sadness. Like you make them just feel bad for you the whole time. So make sure you leave them on a positive. Leave them uplifted. Don't leave them downlifted. And then how do you use powerful language in them? I gave you a quick mini lesson on forceful versus weak power language. So use that, and we can talk about it more in detail in another lecture. Otherwise, you got this. Go and motivate the world.